Open a map of Central America, you see Belize, a small country on the Caribbean coast. Now open a Guatemalan map. Belize disappears. Instead, you see Territorio de Belice. Guatemala claims this entire country as their own. Both sides point to an 1859 treaty to prove who's right. So, I read that treaty. Guatemala says it's void because Britain violated it. But the treaty itself doesn't make the boundary conditional on Britain's obligations. So, who's telling the truth? Right now, the International Court of Justice is deciding whether Belize should even exist. Oral hearings are in 2026. The ruling is expected for 2027. And there's oil involved, potentially billions of barrels in the wider region, with disputed offshore zones in play. Here's what the 1859 treaty actually says. Article 7. Britain agreed to help build the cart road from Guatemala City to the Caribbean coast. Britain never built the road. Guatemala says the border is void. Britain says the border is permanent regardless. So, how did we get here? Spain claimed this territory since the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas. Britain started logging in the 1600s. For 150 years, Spain tried to expel British loggers, attacking settlements in 1717, 1730, 1754 and 1779. Spain lost the Battle of St. George's Caye in 1798 and stopped seriously contesting British presence. Spain signed 3 treaties with Britain in 1763, 1783 and finally in 1786. The 1786 treaty set Britain's southern limit at Sibun River. Britain could log, but Spain kept sovereignty. Then, in 1821, Central America declared independence from Spain. After 18 years of civil wars and chaos, Guatemala finally emerged as an independent republic in 1839. They claimed to inherit all Spanish sovereignty. But Britain kept pushing south, way past that Sibun River limit, all the way down to the Sarstoon River, about 60 miles further south. Guatemala protested. Britain ignored them. Then, in 1859, everything became urgent. The 1850 Clayton-Bulwer Treaty with the United States said Britain couldn't grab new Central American territory after 1850. But Britain had already pushed past their limits. Guatemala, meanwhile, faced an existential threat. An American mercenary named William Walker had made himself president of Nicaragua in 1856, backed by American investors. Guatemala genuinely believed they were next. They needed British weapons and backing, or they could be conquered by Walker's private army. Charles Lennox Wake, British diplomat, arrives in Guatemala. He meets Pedro de Aycena, Guatemala's foreign minister. They sign a treaty in 23 days. For context, Wake's boundary treaties with Nicaragua and Honduras took months. This one took 3 weeks. Look at what just happened. The 1786 treaty set Britain's southern limit at the Sibun River, but Britain had pushed 60 miles further south to the Sarstoon River. This new treaty recognizes that unauthorized expansion. Guatemala legally recognized British control over territory Britain had taken without permission. They signed because they were desperate for protection from Walker. Notice this specific phrase in the treaty. Boundaries that existed previous to and on the first day of January 1850. That date isn't random. By dating the boundary to January 1st, 1850, the day before the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty banned new acquisitions, Britain could tell Washington, "We're not acquiring new territory, we're just recognizing boundaries that already existed." This boundary line runs right through Xunantunich, a Maya archaeological site with a 100-foot pyramid. The Maya built this around 800. 1,000 years before this treaty. When Wake and Aycena signed in 1859, they were 2 European powers carving up lands the Maya had built civilizations on. Were any Maya leaders consulted? No. Article 7. The two parties will use their best efforts for establishing the easiest communication between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. They will contribute towards the construction of a card road. This wasn't just any road. Guatemala had Pacific ports but almost no Atlantic access. Their Caribbean coastline was tiny and underdeveloped. All their exports to Europe had to go the long way around through Mexico or take incredibly slow mountain routes. A direct road to the Caribbean would cut shipping times in half. A British surveyor estimated 157 miles through dense jungle, costing around £145, around 18 million in today's money. Guatemala understood this road as compensation. They were giving up their claim to a massive chunk of territory. In exchange, they would get infrastructure that would transform their economy. So, in 23 days, Britain got legal recognition for territory they'd expanded into without permission. Guatemala got the promise of infrastructure, and the Maya, who'd lived on this land for millennia, got nothing. Years went by and Britain built nothing. Colonial conflicts in India and China took priority. The road was expensive and would help Guatemala, but offer Britain nothing. So, Britain just didn't do it. In 1862, Britain declares the territory a crown colony. Officially a colony now, not just a logging settlement. Still, no road. August 1863. Britain and Guatemala try again. New Deal. Britain would pay £50,000, about 6 million today, barely a third of what the road would cost, and Guatemala would build the road themselves with their own money. Britain ratified it immediately, but Guatemala's Congress delayed, missing the ratification deadline. When they finally ratified it in 1865, they added conditions saying Britain still owed the original road obligation. Britain refused. The deal collapsed. No road was ever built, not even with Guatemala's own money. But here's what Britain did do. As early as 1860 and 1861, they surveyed and marked the boundary line with stone monuments, exactly like Article 1 required. Then, in 1867 and 1869, they sent diplomatic notes, basically saying, "We tried, we're done, Article 7 is void." No road, no money, no more negotiations. From Britain's perspective, the boundary provisions in Articles 1 to 6 were separate from the road provision in Article 7. The road was a nice bonus that didn't work out. The boundary? That was permanent. Guatemala saw it completely different. The road was the point. Essential compensation for giving up territory. No road meant no deal. For 15 years, Guatemala tried to negotiate quietly. But by 1884, Britain had formally declared British Honduras as a crown colony and clearly wasn't budging. That's when, on April 5th, 1884, Guatemala sent their first formal protest to Britain, saying the 1859 treaty is void because Britain violated it. Britain didn't even respond. For nearly a century, the dispute just simmered. Britain treated the boundary as settled. Guatemala treated it as theft. Then, on September 21st, 1981, Belize becomes independent. Guatemala refuses to recognize it. This dispute extends to offshore waters where oil companies are drilling. Belize's onshore production is tiny and collapsing. But in 2024, after 19 years of nothing, companies started exploring offshore again. Why? Because whoever wins at the ICJ controls those maritime zones and the oil underneath. Here's what nobody talks about. Census data shows about 26 to 32,000 Maya people live in the disputed areas today, mostly Quechua and Mopan Maya in southern Belize. That 1859 boundary line cut straight through Maya territories that had existed for centuries. Villages that had been trading and intermarrying for generations suddenly found themselves in different countries. Throughout the 1800s, thousands more Maya fled Guatemala. Foreign investors, including German plantation owners, had taken over massive coffee estates. Guatemala's government was forcing Maya communities to provide labor. So they crossed the border they never agreed to, looking for refuge from systems that treated them as property. Today, the ICJ case is going to decide these borders permanently. How many Maya representatives are involved in the case? 0. Many communities still don't have legal land titles from either government. They're caught between two states that both claim the land beneath their feet. If Guatemala wins, Belize could lose territory, lose maritime zones, or get forced into splitting oil revenue. If Belize wins, Guatemala's 165-year-old claim ends permanently, and dozens of other disputed colonial borders around the world, places like Kashmir and Western Sahara, they're all watching this. Britain signed a treaty promising a road. Britain never built the road. Guatemala says the border is void. Britain, and now Belize, says the border is permanent regardless. One country's occupied territory is another country's homeland. And 26,000 Maya people caught in the middle never got a vote.